Hello and welcome to another video, and in this one we're going to be talking about some gameplay. Specifically in the ADC role, we're going to be looking at Deft, and we've covered in the past 3 lessons now a little bit about the strong side weak side theory, or the concept of it, really. We dove into a lot of theoretical approaches to the game, and we also ended up looking at how our mechanics are very fundamental for us to become competent players. We've acknowledged throughout the few lessons that we've already had that you can be a very knowledgeable player, but you can still fail mechanically. And if you want to succeed, which is most of why people are watching these videos, you want to succeed in solo queue. That is the most fundamental reason why you are watching these videos. And in order to succeed in solo queue, you have to become competent mechanically. That's just reality. Now, of course, you can be really poor mechanically, but you can still climb. But you have to be smart with it. The most effective way to climb solo queue is to be mechanical, however, because solo queue in itself by nature is just fighting. There's a few concepts, it's very simple concepts. You have to just know, and then after that, it's just fighting. But we'll dive more into that later. And we're going to start off with the first, now before I go into this video, before I go into this footage, and this is going to be more of a lesson 4 being a much more analytical part of the video, where we're actually going to be looking at certain movements. I haven't seen the video yet, so we're going to be watching it for the first time together. The video is quite recent. And in this video, we're going to be maybe looking at, we're going to be looking at how Deft is playing and what alternatives could be possible based on how he's playing. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at a few concepts that are very basic to understand and really important to understand before we start going over more and more complex videos. And again, any footage in this channel that I'll be displaying on the screen and we'll be actually analyzing will be Master, Grandmaster, or Challenger, or Pro Play. So it will be either in the 3 ranks or the stage we'll be looking at, so that you as viewers can see what good solo queue should look like and what you're playing. In fact, before we start this video, before we start looking into the actual footage, we're going to go over a quick concept, quick mind concept that we've made here, or I've made here really briefly. So very simple. I mean, this is just going to make it so simple. Again, don't try to overcomplicate this. This is the basis of any review. This is the basis of what I'm trying to get you to understand. And I'm comparing this to what you're currently probably going through, because whether you're in silver, gold, platinum, diamond, or even master and challenger, well, less than master and challenger, but a lot more below that, and definitely a lot more like when it comes to like bronze, silver, gold, platinum. Those areas, this is an ongoing issue. Now, when I'm coaching concepts. I'm not coaching the game. I'm coaching the game, but I'm not coaching every little situation. I'm coaching the concepts that are important, that should be applied to the situation. Because when we look at League of Legends, you'll see that the game is very conceptual, and it's hard to be aware of everything happening at once, because you have to factor in player skill, you have to factor in champions, you have to factor in internet connection. There's so many concepts that, like, someone could just DC, right? A lot of factors that go into whether you're going to win or lose a solo queue game. And so those concepts are very arbitrary. Those concepts are they're hard to track. Okay? it's like a snowflake. You're never going to really be able to quantify the amount of mistakes or the amount of irregular concepts that low elo players will, well, make up. And that's what they're technically doing. They're making up most of the time what they're doing. They just think it's right. Whether they've seen it through a video and then completely misconstructed it in their head, or I'm not sure that's a word, or deconstructed them in their heads, and then when it came out as gameplay, the concepts in their head came out as gameplay, it's not the same thing. All right, and of course there was a lot of mental gymnastics when you're watching a video when it comes to learning, especially a good one where the concepts are not like, hey, you should ward, or just anything really generic or simple, anything mainstream, which is usually very weak content. No offense to anyone, of course, because of course the problem with that content is that it's dumb and people can understand it, but most people fail at League of Legends because the content on the mainstream platforms just don't work. Of course, it's not everybody. There's a select really good ones. But the majority of League of Legends content is directed towards... It's a wrong direction, to say the least. But anyways, we'll get into that maybe in the future. That has nothing to do with the lesson here, at least. It's just my personal take on what's happening. But so quickly, just looking at this, what's happening, going off of what I said, game starts. It's very simple. Game has started. Okay, well, now let's see. So this is you. Okay, this is you. Or this is hopefully you. Right? Maybe after some like coaching videos. And this is like teammate. Okay, teammate's gold. Gold, platinum, whatever. Okay, so teammate, and then hopefully you, after you've watched some videos and you're like aware of what's happening. Everything that I talk about in my videos when I'm teaching the game will be based on concepts, and these actually are they actually are chronological. I'm gonna explain in a second. This I just whatever. So when you look at something like this, when you look at coaching videos, specifically mine that I'm going to be posting, a lot of, I'm not looking at the entirety of the video because I'm really just trying to translate the video in concepts to you that you can start applying. This is really important to understand. I had a client yesterday, Iron player. It's actually the first player who is Iron that came to me for coaching. I was actually very surprised when I saw him play. And then I realized that this person doesn't have MOBA experience. He doesn't actually know what a MOBA is, and that's absolutely fine. Then I realized that people are not that different from that Iron player, in the sense where they have weird ideas of the game. And so what I did with him, and what I'm doing with you today in this lesson, hopefully, if we can like deliver this with ease here, is these concepts here. Okay, so let's get into a game. So we start the game, we get into load screen, and then immediately we're all in like the base, and we're kind of waiting for the thing to load, or the barrier to fall, and you're gonna go to do your stuff in your lanes. You're already kind of thinking of who is strong side, weak side. At this point in the game, when the barrier falls in the beginning of the game, and you have like a blitzcrank or something, you can move. If you have Caitlyn, Karma, enemy team has like Kog'Maw and something like, I don't know, useless like Yuumi with that. And you have like Caitlyn, Karma, and you're winning mid lane. Okay, you can just move and get it to like strong side. You can force strong side and weak side with invades, but you have to be aware of what strong side and weak side looks like. And you're not going to see this even in like master, unfortunately, but you will see it in higher levels and in different regions. I'm playing in NA, so it's biased, right? But strong side and weak side is something that's already like, okay, well, what's going to happen? Are they going to invade me? I lost a game in 3.5 minutes today. Because the enemy had a Caitlyn and Karma, and I warded the top side river as a jungler, and then when I pathed to bottom lane to get my leash, I realized that my teammates hadn't warded. This is master. And then we got late invaded. And then because we got late invaded, our mid didn't have prio, and then man, just don't want to think about it. It was awful. But it's very important to start knowing what strong side and weak sides are, just as you're in the game. This is a concept that I will constantly talk about when I'm doing the VODs. And the reason I have it as the first thing is because it's the first thing you should be really looking at, because this is all to do with champion selection. Now, whether your teammates play their champions like humans is up for debate. But again, we're going to be talking about what the game should look like, not what the game could look like in like platinum or gold or bronze or whatever. And what I want you to do is just drop everything that you know. If you're, of course, low elo, if you're like bronze, silver, gold, platinum, dropping everything and looking at the game from a completely fresh, perhaps would be the right word, perspective. It would be the best way to understand it, because if you conceptually understand it, you're going to succeed. Because most people, even in silver and gold, are not, like, some of them are quite mechanically good, some of them, very few, and majority of them, I would say like 99% of silver players and gold players have the potential to be very, very good. Okay? They have the potential to be very, very good mechanically, but they just don't know what they're doing. So if they just fix the concepts, the game is easy. Okay, so moving forward, I mean, just to briefly cover this before we actually get into the game. Looking at strong side, weak side, right? Awareness of jungle opening. Okay, where does the jungler start? If the jungler starts top side, okay, what could that look like? He will be bottom once he's finished his top side jungle, if he's not invading. And then after that, his camps on the top side will spawn. Around 4:30, we can assume he's back in top side. Then we can use that same concept of, okay, well, 1:30 is the initial spawn. That means 4:30 should be the next spawn. This is, again, in relevance to the side of which quadrant the opposing jungler or even your jungler will essentially move. And of course, this could be broken really easily, but looking at this from a most fundamental sense, right? You can just start using this time gap for like 6:30 or 7 or 8:30, etc., right? 8:30 is 8 minutes is a very crucial time in the game. It's when this pendulum that I talked about the jungle pendulum in the first lesson, breaks. And depending on which jungler has or which, not jungler necessarily, but team has the potential to fight, they will take that fight, especially on blue side, right? Because 8 minutes is like huge. So, because it breaks the game. 8 minutes is great. Taking a Shelly when you're losing the game to break someone out of lane is a very, very good way to just find some breathing room. Now, of course, this could be bad in certain cases because it opens up for a freeze, but we're talking about solo queue here. So there are, that is actually a small gap in like, or a small loophole in that. However, looking at the nature of solo queue, most people are not freezing like properly. And again, you should, but we'll talk about that stuff later. So moving forward, again, wave openings. This is when you get into the lane. Okay, and again, these are not arbitrary, these are actually real. These are some concepts that I'm listing now before we get into game. Make sure you remember these before we actually go into the footage, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything else. There's nothing else to talk about. It's just the same shit over and over and over again. Just get yourself familiar with it, and you will find more success. Because right now what's happening in your head is you have, you know, there's like 75 different thoughts going on, but only really 5 of them actually matter. 70 of these is just random thoughts of nothingness. They don't matter. The problem is you're having issues deciphering one from the other. And that's natural. That's absolutely fine, because that is, well, in video games, that's very important. For example, in Rocket League, that's what I played recently. I started playing Rocket League like 6 months ago. And I just played it for fun because my friend played it, and I said, okay, whatever. I have some time to kill. Let's do it. And of course, I'm playing ranked. I'm not playing casual. And I use the same concepts that people or you would want to know apply to League of Legends when it comes to improvement, right? In the sense where, of course, like one game has a dragon and the other one has cars. Of course, this is two very separate dimensions of gameplay. We can call it maybe, but the idea of improving at these things are not that far apart, because just like in any other game, and I got like diamond in this, and then I was gonna get higher, but I think I can get higher, but I'm not gonna. That's not happening. I'm way too like that's just not happening. So moving forward, it's the same concepts. Because I was starting to be more aware of certain concepts in Rocket League, I was able to get like I'm not great. I'm actually pretty bad, I think. But I was able to climb because I realized, well, everything else that I'm thinking about the game is useless. Everyone is saying the same thing. All of the players that are good are saying the same thing. So I'll just do that. And it was easy. And of course I didn't really get far, but a lot of that is for like dedication reasons. And moving forward, so when we get into the game, we're thinking about strong side, weak side invade. We're thinking, and this is again with respects to what is our champion selection looking like. We're thinking about awareness of jungle openings. Okay, what does a jungler want to do? What can the jungler do against us? We're looking at when the minions spawn, or before even the minions spawn, we can think about, okay, well, how do we want to play the lane out? I just realized this is the same thing. My bad. Yeah, so I apologize. This is like the same thing. This is what I actually forgot to write. I was going to write something here. Oh, okay. Well, whatever. Here, we can just delete it. Let's make it empty. So, right, like these are three concepts that I am thinking about when I'm playing. These are three concepts that you should be aware of. These are not chained to like one specific game. This is universal for everything. This is universal for every single game. And of course, there's other things as well, but I'm starting off easy, right? This is just basic stuff. And then when a mistake happens, right, where if you look at the bottom row, okay, this is your teammate, by the way, so if this wasn't clear to you, this line is, the orange is you, hopefully, right? Because this will change the way you play the game. And then the blue is your teammate, and this is like the typical gold player, the typical platinum player, the typical diamond player, and then it's some master players even, right? Many really. ADC goes solo invading or so. Well, I mean, okay, well this is not happening that high up, but like yes, it will happen in gold and platinum and silver. I've seen it. ADC just randomly goes solo invading. It's very weird. It's very strange. Anyways, people have arguments in low elo about their confusions, and when two confused people have arguments, it usually is never a good outcome. And then when a mistake happens, they're unaware they're not aware of how to recover. Recovery is really important, because again, right, let's delete this. Okay, even in high elo, major mistake happens. Well, what's happening here? Of course, assuming this isn't a detriment, like a 100% loss, this is just a small, unfortunate event, right? Like, that's reasonable. Something reasonable, like, I don't know, top dies solo. It's fine. That's his major mistake, but he got solo killed. But it's not something that's going to, like, lose you the game. Maybe he's weak-sided now. Maybe you had two strong sides, and now your top solo died, so now and your bottom got a kill. Now, immediately, your bottom lane is strong side because they have the highest chance to help you actually carry the game, assuming the champions are, meeting that criteria, right? And of course, we're going to be looking at that a lot more going forward. So major mistakes are like, okay, well, it's different the higher level you go, because you can see it from the anger, the type of arguments people have. If you contrasted the type of arguments high elo players have and the types of arguments that low elo players have, I want you to try this. Maybe watch a famous streamer or something playing in like Master or GM or Challenger. The flame is very different. Well, in NA at least. Europeans are just nuts, but In NA, I mean, it's watchable. Okay, you cannot play in EU without turning pings off. I'm gonna be honest. But moving forward into this, right? I don't want to get too sidetracked here. Major mistakes happen, but two elos, two different levels of play handle it very differently. Low elo players don't know how to fix it, because when you don't know how to fix a mistake, your immediate reaction is to just get angry and tilt. In high elo, people don't get angry immediately because they know how to recover. This morning, my Aatrox died against the Camille. He was strong side. And he died. So he died before I even finished my clear. Like, I was running up there, but he just died. And then he died again. And then it was like, holy shit, this is not the greatest. And so eventually he just built armor. Like, he built tank Aatrox and we won because he just didn't die. And our bot side carried because we threw all of our resources to the opposite side of the map, knowing that, okay, this is a major mistake made. We have a huge deficit in a lane that we shouldn't have a deficit because Aatrox is going to have a really hard time carrying the game now. And so we focused on the recovery, whereas in low elo, they'll focus on the tilt and FF. Now, the reason this is so relevant to you is because you can be this person all you want. But if you're playing in games like silver, gold, platinum, diamond, bronze even, and I guess iron now. But when you play in these ranks, you're never going to find people like this. You're always going to find people like this. So now you have to essentially become like a phenomenon or like something unnatural, because you're not exposed to what high level gameplay looks like. You're not exposed to what high level league can feel like, and that's fine. Of course, some of my viewers will be, right, because you guys are like higher ranks. But there's a lot of people, majority of the people don't know how good League of Legends even feels like. Looking at they watch it all day, but they don't actually know how it feels. And the closest thing I could really say to it is it feels like playing any sport at a really high level. It's the same thing, right? It's a very fun thing to do, but unfortunately, most people can't feel that. Especially ADC players, because they definitely need teammates. Well, they don't, but you know, they're going to cry about it, so might as well give them some teammates. Now, moving forward, in low levels of play, they're going to make major mistakes and they're going to tilt and they're going to FF. So you have to become an anomaly, essentially. And in order to do that, you have to be able to decipher the two types of thoughts. These are two very different types of thoughts. One doesn't encompass anger and frustration, and the other does. And that's really crucial to understand. So it's really important that we become the player that's going to have these types of thought processes, because these are the ones that are going to find you success. Of course, you're going to get angry, and then you're going to zigzag, and you're going to think, and then you're going to jump to this randomly because maybe something goes wrong and you can't control your thoughts yet, and that's absolutely fine. But then eventually you'll realize your error, and then maybe you just end up, I'm use red because it's easier to see. You'll randomly be back up here. You're like, okay, wait, I got to start thinking. The game pace, wave openings, etc. That's absolutely good. That's where you want to be. You want to stay here. You want to stay consistent on this. A lot of players trying to learn these two things, or not these two things, but this, are going to jump between their random thoughts of thinking, which is what they've essentially programmed their minds subconsciously to do as they ended up absorbing more and more information about the game over the years. And all of that stuff completely separates you from what actually matters, which is this stuff. This is the most crucial. Right? So When a major mistake happens in higher level, there is a recovery phase. Okay? And everything that we want to do is thrown into that recovery. That's what we're thinking. We're thinking about recovery. So when I'm coaching or when we watch pro players play the game and they die, now what you're thinking is, okay, well, how do I recover this? Many ways you can recover. Of course, easier ways, you can roam. That's one way to recover. That's a very generic way to recover something. You can just roam and incite chaos. If you know you don't find value, if your value is like here and then it drops over time in the game, then roaming is pretty good because this entices chaos. And if it entices chaos, it lets you scale the game in your favor, despite you being down in as a low economy champion. Elise is a good one. Rek'Sai's a pretty good one. And of course, these are very gross examples, right? Roaming is huge. Cull is another example of recovery. Pulling the wave could be recovery. Freezing could be recovery. Freezing could also be a way to just get leads, of course, but freezing in itself is heavily used during moments where you have to recover. Like, that could be useful for you. Of course, it gets to a point where it's like you can't even freeze, right? Because, but we'll look at that gameplay stuff in a bit. Whereas, again, in contrast to in low elo, it's like, okay, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm gonna get angry, and then now I'm gonna tilt. This is why you're tilted. You're tilted not because of the game. You're tilted because of the lack of knowledge to approach the game in the proper way you have to. That's where your tilt stems from. You just don't know what to do. Most people who are angry are not angry even at you. They're angry at the fact that they have no idea what to do. And it's like the most natural response you're going to see players have. Usually if people get really tilted really early, I think saying the word weak mentally doesn't sound the greatest. Doesn't sound the most appealing way. But in a way, I would say it's true. Weak players get angry really easily. Mentally weak. Now, of course, there's anomalies. Like, you could be a lot of, I'm not going to name names, but you could be a lot of fit, insert your favorite streamer here. He's probably really toxic. There's a few streamers that are very, very toxic. But again, through their toxicity, they're still able to do this. Right? So you can be a complete asshole, but you could still be able to do. That's different. Okay? So, again, this is chronological. Weak side, strong side. It's something that I'm thinking about in the game. You should as well. Awareness of jungle openings. Okay, what can the jungler do? How does this game look like? Of course, you could do this in champion selection as well, but this is still very, very close to. This is basically, it's almost the same thing. It's almost the same thing if you think about it. When you get to a certain level of awareness and competency in the game, all of these, how do I delete this right here? All of these concepts, well, except for this one, I guess, because it's a mistake, they kind of merge, and then there's less and less questions about the game. You have so many questions because these concepts haven't merged together yet. You're still picking parts of the puzzle, and you're putting pieces together, but like all the pieces are like either they're sky or they're like the ocean, so that's all blue and you have no idea what goes where. That's the problem. I mean, it's a very clear representation of the League content today, which is most of it is just clutter, really. And it's very hard to find and pick apart content when really all you have is two pieces that look very similar, and it's like, okay, well, one just looks more tempting to go to. That's the mass majority of people watching League media right now, which is completely fine, of course, but I'm talking about the demographic that's actively trying to improve. That's the problem. But that's also fine because, whatever, nothing you can do. Or it's not your problem, technically, because your problem is just to get you to, again, dissolve these concepts. So you want to know these concepts, and then when you play the game and you become really good at every concept and you put it all together, everything kind of dissolves and all of your questions about the game kind of disappear. And then you have like semi questions. You have specific questions, and that's That's what you're going to see when I'm coaching challenger players, for example. That the questions are more specific rather than, or in contrast to low elo coaching, when I'm coaching someone perhaps in diamond or platinum or gold. The contrast is that, well, even in master, honestly, it has to be the ability to actually be aware of the content of what you have to think about is more apparent. And in high elo, these concepts are already kind of understood, and then you just have specific questions. Okay, let's look at some gameplay. The minimap is a little bit covered, and this is not going to be an issue because I will be here to guide you through what is happening. I don't have to see the entirety of it. And again, we're only covering the surface level concepts here. Nothing that in-depth, although I may go a little bit in-depth with certain micro movements, but if I do that, follow along or try to follow along. And if you're not able to, that's absolutely fine because they don't matter right now. All that matters is you understand the game for what it is, and eventually the smaller building blocks of your knowledge will begin to create your understanding of the game over time. So this is not something that should be rushed, and if you don't understand it, that's absolutely fine. You need to just chill out and then watch it, and over time, you will start to slowly understand it. There's a lot of people that are frustrated about the game. There's a lot of frustrations. I've met a lot of frustrated people. Not because it's... And of course, a lot of people will say it's just a game, but I've met a lot of frustrated people that are very angry about their own competency. Even though I completely and utterly love to destroy ego, there is a lot of anger in the community about incompetency in order to be able to, you know, do certain things. Which, again, the message here is just to, like, it's chill. You're good. You will eventually understand it, but you have to change your approach, and you have to do it slowly. It's not an overnight thing, sadly. This Heimerdinger is a god. Again, moving briefly into the game. First wave gets pulled. And this is really just for a favorable lane state on the side of red. And really, we're just looking for push. That's all we're really doing. It's also going to be a little bit scary. We don't want to actually end up eating any damage from the initial E. And again, you're going to notice Def's opening in the lane. Opening it from a very defensive standpoint, right? And here, we're gonna do like... here, well, that's green, so we'll do red instead. And we can just talk about some incorrect pockets to be in this situation relative to what Varus could actually get away with, along with Heimerdinger, okay? Of course, through colors and a basic understanding, because a lot of people fail to understand this when it's discussed in quick methods. But again, we're gonna call this box here a pocket. Okay, so every box I make is a pocket. I mean, of course, these pockets are... they have reasons to be in them. There are reasons to be in each pocket. Okay, we're going to color them all green for now, or all red for now, until we have decided what is a possible good pocket to be in. And a very interesting way to actually... well, I guess visually it wouldn't work. But anyways, we'll bring that up later. Maybe. So here... why does Def choose this pocket? He chooses to stay in this pocket. So if we just see what he attempts to do. Why does he do this? Right? Obviously, this isn't exactly where he's standing, but you get the idea. It's like the space, okay? You can imagine the square like here or something. It's the same thing, okay? It's not like specific exact pinpoint locations. This is, again, just a concept that I need you to be aware of, okay? Well, Varus can use a lot of things. He has most likely his E available to him, and his E range is really, really far. It's like here. Now, if Varus moves up, this yellow line also moves up, which means the range at which he can affect you also moves up. Well, do we want to get hit by Varus? No. We don't want to get hit by Varus E. Can we respond to Varus E? Yes, but you don't have to. Because it's harder to respond to Varus E, and you have a lot to lose. You're not going to be able to utilize Q. Q cannot respond. And if you do lose the trade, you're losing in a matchup where you have no sustain. The only sustain you have, well, you excluding the potions. This is not a Soraka. This is not a Nami where you have sustain. Because you don't have sustain, it's going to be very hard for you to play for resource management. And resource is like mana, for example. Mana is a resource. So you can use sustain to attack resource. So what you're essentially doing is you're attacking HP for mana. Of course, this is more relevant on certain champions that utilize one more than the other. Certain champions have higher costs. Usually those are the ones that rely on mana. For example, if you're in mid lane, I'll give you an example even, because we're discussing bottom lane here, but I want to be more, you know, every role, because not everyone is a bot lane player. But in mid lane, any champion with high mana costs, Rise. Anivia, I believe. Anything that can be easily exhausted by attacking mana. Now, again, this is just conceptual. This is not necessarily applying here. Here, she doesn't want to take damage because she can't really respond. She has no way to sustain. So going HP for HP against in this moment is bad. So now the question is, okay, well, where can Varus E and what's the location he can E at? Well, if we know Varus is standing here, we know that he can use E like anywhere around here. Now, of course, I'm going to be a little bit off. Okay, I'm not a Varus main. Now, with these small micro things, I will be a little bit off. But again, this is conceptual. You have to understand it, why he's doing this. And then if you know the exact pinpoint of Varus E, then you know that's going to find you value in game. So here, Varus E is somewhere here. And so we don't want to get hit. We just want the minions. We just want to try to get a push lead because the enemy has pretty good push as well. That's why we just start hitting the wave immediately. Okay? In order to hit the wave, we stand in the zone that Heimerdinger can't do anything and Varus can't do anything, which is here. If you stood here, it's not good because Varus can respond. If you stood here, it's pretty int because Heimerdinger will just poke you. No reason to stand in the wave either. Varus can E you in the wave. You don't want to like allow him to do that. So here you can avoid the E and you can still hit all of the minions. Your goal is to take out these minions. This is the goal. This is the objective. This is the main concept. Again, as I discussed, we had those boxes, right? And obviously we had the high-low player and then we had the low-low player concepts, right? This is a concept that you have to start being aware of. The fact that, okay, well, who can actually push the lane? Because the person who can get control on the first wave will be able to get control on the next wave. And waves, if you've discussed, if you saw the earlier lessons where I talk about the jungle pendulum, I talk about how waves interact a little, or actually I have a video on waves. Just go over that video. You're going to see how the waves interact. And again, that's more of a higher level. That's like waves actually in gameplay. I don't care about making content on how to freeze the game or how to freeze the lane. I don't want to make content about how to slow push or how to dive. This stuff is self-explanatory. What we're looking at is minion wave management in relation to the game, not in a concept of itself, because that should be already kind of understood. And if you don't understand that, there is a library of knowledge, right? Again, the videos that I'm trying to explain here are going to cover the basics, but they're going to cover the basics in a way where it's like covering the basics in an advanced way, but they're still the basics. And the only reason I'm doing this approach is because the alternative hasn't really worked well when we look at mainstream. Okay? So, going back to the video here again, rather slowly, right? We can acknowledge that because Varus can't respond with E, our goal here is to hit the minions. This is a major concept. And again, what I'll do is I will use the word main concept or just a concept. I'm not sure what word to use. But I want to, and anytime I call something a concept, you should just be able to note it in game, of course, in game. Now, obviously, I will do theoretical stuff, but that's something else. You don't have to memorize that stuff, of course. But when it comes to the in game, when I call something a concept, it's important for you to just be aware of it, because that will be repeated every single VOD I do. Okay, just to be clear on that. But this is a very major concept. Who has push in lane? Whoever has control of wave 1 can control the alternative waves, or the future waves. And when you look at the video where I talk about waves in a gameplay perspective, you're going to notice that when the wave goes bad, you're already dead. When the wave goes bad, something is going to happen. The whole game is played on waves. It's very important for you to start manipulating them as well. So he Qs, and he Qs just to thin out the entire thing here. And then he spaces back. Again, as you can see, we talked about when he spaces back. He spaces back, why? Because when Varus moves up, his line, and again, this is Genji Ruler on the other side, so not just some random ADC player, a very, very good ADC player on the other side, will punish you for every little misstep you make. So again, anytime we see Def getting punished by Ruler, potentially in this video, it is not by some random player, it is Ruler on the other side here. So now, right here, well, the max range is here. Okay, we're safe. All of a sudden, he walks up, Ruler clicks back. Let's see that one more time. Ruler moves up. Def moves back. Ruler moves back. Def moves up. This is the transaction happening right now between these two players. The controller here is Ruler, because he has the higher ranged ability. Because Def doesn't have the sustain needed to be able to just take random points of damage. He also has this nonsense. It's very crucial to understand. Now, of course, if this was Vayne, and this was something useless, like I don't know, I wouldn't say useless, but like, let's say Yuumi. Yuumi's not useless, but kind of she is if you have Vayne, and enemy is like, maybe this is like Karma, like something really obnoxious. Well, now this transaction between the two players are in favor of the party with higher range. If it's Caitlyn into Vayne, then it's Caitlyn. Now, of course, champions can have high range because Caitlyn has very high range. But because Varus' ability is able to outspace Caitlyn's auto range, this champion is in control. When this champion uses his ability and now it's just an auto for auto battle, and Varus has like 525. Now, again, I could be wrong about this. I don't think it's 525. It's like 575 or 550. I'm not entirely sure. Caitlyn's, I know, is a little bit like it's bigger, right? Which means that now if you go auto for auto, let's say hypothetically, for the sake of, you know, this concept, right? 525 is less than 600, obviously, which means that this champion's in control. But if this champion, if the 525 champion, if the lesser range champion, or let's say 550 champion, has an ability that can outrange the 600 champion, and the 600 champion will lose because they don't have the resource to just consistently build up HP back, they will space that. Of course, this depends, but in this case, Varus is a very, very basic example of that. Varus E kind of hurts. So you can see Deft is simply just spacing it. This is very important to understand, because that's essentially what the point of clicking back and forth is when you get competent at clicking back and forth, you're getting competent at this transaction moving up and down. This is very crucial. Specifically, this is crucial in fighting games. Now, I don't really play fighting games, nor have I a history of playing fighting games, but I played Brawlhalla a few times. Was really bad at it, but I noticed that in that game, spacing is so crucial. This is a concept in Brawlhalla. This is a concept in Street Fighter, I believe. Yeah, it definitely is. These concepts are generally in fighting games, and it's the same thing in League of Legends here. This is a very important thing to understand. Because if you don't understand this, people who understand the concept will just shit on you. I promise you. So, and again, I've had so many people, up in even diamond players, master player, randomly walking, eating an E to the face, question marking, what's going on here, right? So we can see how Deft finds his discipline and moves in accordance to what he's able to do and not what's hopeful. Now, of course, he has to sustain on the fleet footwork. And so he does have that advantage. However, that's not an excuse to take free damage. Anyways, moving back, ends up queuing, and now as you can see, well, Deft is down an ability now. Ruler sees this ability is down, Ruler moves in, Deft knows he has E. Deft spaces all the way back. He doesn't space here. Again, we talked about how Ruler's range works. Here. His area to impact is up until here. Moves up a little bit, area to impact a little bit bigger. Moves back, area to impact a little bit less. You have to be aware of the highest range ability that can hit you when you're laning. Okay? You're playing against Xerath in mid lane? Okay. Maybe he starts level 1 Q? I don't know. Okay, well, you're playing on Q. You're playing against Fizz? Okay, well, he can't really do anything level 1 if you're, like, ranged, for example. As easily. Now the spacing is different. The spacing is relative to the... How do we word this? It is relative to the initial impact. Now this can change. Sometimes taking the initial impact is... There's nothing you can do. If you ever played the Orianna, if you ever played Orianna versus Cat, Orianna versus Kata, not all the time can you just negate impact. Sometimes you have to take impact. Sometimes taking impact is the only way to succeed in the lane. You have to take some HP in order to get minions. You can't just not take minions. But that's different. That's a different dynamic. And of course, this could be very, very easily confused for people starting to really understand League or trying to understand the game at a higher level here. And so again, in this case, because again, if you can't do it, then you don't understand it. Because this is, this takes practice. This takes a lot of practice. And again, this could be practiced in 1v1s. This is like the best way to practice it. Or just play the game. You know, that's also good. So anyways, Lux gets hit a bit there. It's completely fine. And now we space away. Losing out on the push, as you can see. It's very hard to get push in this lane, considering the matchup. And now first wave is very fast. It's played out quickly. The push is really, really quick. We're not in really much trouble. Because even if Ruler hits 2, it's still fine. Now, we still don't have control of the first wave. But notice what we're still doing. We're still spacing in the max range. Again, as you can see what he's doing here, it's very nice actually. This is something that you may not have noticed. But this is mastery of your champion. This is a very small thing that you have to start doing. Notice what he does. He walks up. Now here, he's going to take damage. He's going to take damage. But why does he take damage here? And this is kind of going back into the Orianna versus Katarina example, but in a much less subtle way. He hits this one in the back. Well, he hits this one because now he's aligned all of the minions to Q right through. This way he doesn't have to space upwards constantly. Heimerdinger backs up. So does Ruler. He comes out. And now here, could go ward. Doesn't have to. Spaces back again. And notice when he spaces back, he spaces immediately on the 2 spike. This is another concept that's really important for you to start to understand. This video is very basic, by the way. The more and more lessons I cover, the more advanced I will go in these dissections of the game or the lane phase here, and it's going to get really complex. But it's very crucial that you start to understand the most basic things, why he's doing certain things. This again is a very major concept. Level 2 spike. This is relevant in all lanes, even in the jungle. When level 2 comes out, see, it's not, we don't back up on 2. We back up before they hit 2. We don't just, we don't back, okay, we don't sit here until they hit level 2 and then they run us. Because even if we space it, we're still getting hit by damage. Instead, what we're doing is we're leaving. We know that these minions aren't going to die. We know that this one is going to die. We know that we can easily, even if there's space here, we can literally just queue it and leave. Because mana is not a resource that's under that much stress here. If we really wanted the minion. Or we could get it from supermax range if we're able to just space and auto it, right? So, she just leaves after hitting the minion. Of course, this is also like, she has time to hit that minion as well. And again, we're off the assumption that, or my previous example was off the assumption that it's like higher, but here, of course, you could just hit it, as she does. But notice how she backs up after hitting the first minion. She doesn't just allow them to get to and run her down. So this is just another major concept that you have to be aware of when looking at League. And this seems so simple, but it's like, it's simple, yes, but at the same time, people don't understand that at higher levels of play, this is not just level 2 going in, this is level 1 going in. People will go at level 1. They will literally walk up and engage. If it's like Nautilus or something, he will take damage before he hits 2, knowing that the second the minion is dead, assuming that it's going to die in the next few seconds, and already be engaged onto you. The speed at which this second level comes out in bot lane and is used gets faster and faster the higher level you get. In low levels of play, you're not going to see it even be used because you're just going to be literally spaced back while they're level 2. In more novice levels, like, I don't know, silver, gold, platinum, less in diamond, more in diamond 4 and 3, less in diamond 1 and higher, there is a divide that does exist. It's a slight one, but it does exist. Sort of. Eventually you'll realize it's just diamond, but really, the higher level you get, the faster this is utilized. So you need to move away. Now, your enemy teammates aren't going to do that in gold. They're just not going to do that in gold. But that's the point. We are going to assume they will and play as though they will, because that is the correct way to play. Not because it's not, it doesn't mean that you're just running away and giving them an advantage. This is if they're really good. Now, you're going to be playing in very lower, like a lot of people are playing in like gold, platinum, silver, diamond. you're going to be playing in these ranks where people don't utilize this enough or properly even. If that is the case, that's absolutely fine. You still respect it because it is, again, I'm going to use this idea a lot. And this again is another really important concept to know, is level people as though they are really good and then level them down. Don't underestimate an opponent, even if you're smurfing. If you're a master player or a GM player smurfing in platinum or gold or even silver, even smurfing in bronze, level them down. Because if you realize that they can actually do something, it's already too late. You've already lost the advantage. So, of course, here, it's less of a leveling process and more of a relative understanding that these people on the other side are not incompetent at what they're doing. And so we can see Deft backs up, and this takes a lot of discipline. Discipline is the most important thing for all ADC players. That's what they lack the most. If there's something that every single ADC player lacks in League of Legends, it is discipline. Not every, of course. There are very, very good ADC players, but like 99% of ADC players that are playing AD. Now, when I talk about this, I mean the general populace that is playing solo queue. Solo queue demographic ADCs, not pro players. Some pro players, of course, they will vary, but the ladder, the solo queue ladder in bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, master, grandmaster even, and even in challenger, this exists. They will lack discipline, and then they will lose. This happens. This is not even constrained to low elo. This isn't challenger. In some of the best regions in challenger, ADCs will lack discipline. And when you approach it from a logical side, the emotional side wins over every single time for these people. But as a League player, you can relate to that emotional pain when you have to give up a huge wave because you're 1 HP and the enemy will just dive you, but you know that you need these minions, but you also know that if you stay, you're going to lose these minions and you're going to lose your life, so you have to lose these minions. It is a sacrifice, a mental sacrifice to a lot of people to do this. For example, this is just a common situation that I myself have run into in solo queue. I myself have seen very elite ADCs do it, participated with them in begging them to leave, but realizing that it is a futile attempt because nothing can apparently win against the human brain there. And so you have to have discipline when you play AD, and of course this is also relevant to mid lane. Of course in mid lane you could be a bit of a psychopath, but AD carries must be disciplined, because especially in these matchups where you just don't have that button that can just bail you out of situations, you are gonna get punished for every mistake. Okay, nice dodge. Tower goes up. Unfortunately, it gets taken out by the main tower. The bigger tower just beats the smaller tower because it's just better. And then E comes out. This is just they place for a ward. Okay, ping for a ward. Very interesting by Ruler, by the way. You notice Ruler's movements here. Of course, they're crashing second wave, which isn't like the greatest, right? Or they're, yeah. So the second wave is crashed. And now, of course, they can still find a base if they just completely demolish this wave, because Caitlyn and Lux will have, and if obviously they have to issue a base immediately, because Caitlyn and Lux aren't gonna just be able to kill off 3 casters and then also be able to kill off another cannon wave, right? 3 casters plus a cannon wave. It's not going to be easy for these 2 champions just to immediately obliterate. And so if they do on the side of red here completely like just get rid of their HP to just blow the whole wave up, this could be a base timer here. Of course, there's no necessity for that, because that again is dependent on what the rest of the game looks like and what they want to do. And again, I'm not even covering quite literally the map is covered here, so no pun intended, but I'm not even going to be covering what's happening on the map, mainly because, well, I'm not going to be covering too much, Mainly because, well, one, it's covered, and two, we're just looking at basic stuff here, okay? So I want to keep this one relatively short as well, because the next video is something that I have to diligently work on and schedule. I see, again, Lux throws out the E, misses it, and then that was really nice, by the way, by what Ruler just said there. Ruler didn't just immediately use his E. It's very subtle movement, really, there. Where he walks up, he sees the Q coming, and then he leaves, and then he E's at the end, because he knows that he can get that extra range. He then actually, very interesting as well, takes this wave and then pulls it closer to him. Because what does Ruler want to do here? Ruler wants to crash the third wave. Ruler wants to crash the third wave. Ruler has no intention to not crash the third wave here. So as you can see, Caitlyn uses her ability, and Ruler uses this, and what's happening here is these minions, the frontline minions on Ruler's side, have just died off. Which means that Caitlyn's minions are now finding a target. This dies. These minions are now finding a target. Ruler realizes that before they can target this minion, or his minions, he takes the aggro, catches it. Again, you can catch aggro by just presenting yourself to the minions before your minions arrive, or before your minions get a chance to introduce themselves. And then use this to pull them. And then eventually, when you don't attack them and these three minions attack your minions, the target of their minions will then change to your minions. But the thing that's going to happen is this. Look at where the wave ends up. You can pull it a little bit deeper. Now, this is a very subtle use, really, of it, right? Now, in all honesty, it doesn't even really achieve much if you look at it closely. However, this is still something that does exist in the game. So you can pull. Now, of course, you're going to utilize this in many cases. So again, this is a concept of something that you should be aware of, which will be shown because this is literally the mechanics of the game. If you can catch aggro before something, you can pull it to move it to a different location. Now here, if you don't catch aggro, wave still ends here. You can still kill it. Nothing really ends up happening. So all that happens is he just pulls one minion slightly closer. Nothing really happened. But this mechanic does exist. It's not really even a mechanic. This rule, this law does exist in the game. And you can utilize this in certain ways. So now that you know it exists, you should be creative with it. So when certain things are happening in the wave, and this is for really talented players, knowing this or having this fundamental idea of this can happen, you can change how you play the lane. You can do certain things where you're like, oh, well, I could have just done that. You can redirect the opponent's minions. Now, anyways, here, moving back to this here, we might see Ruler just crash the wave. He might actually just crash on 4, which is also completely fine. Again, no reason to immediately crash 3, no value for crashing 3. And we can see that based on Lee Sin's routes, perhaps his jungler is playing it slower, which means that now if something does end up happening and Ruler is required to move into the river, it'll be more aligned to the timing on wave 4 than wave 3. And this is something, again, you have to be really aware of, because now this is a concept that's happening on the map, but I can't explain it because I can't say everything. But this is something that does exist here, where if your jungler, again, this is a little more higher level here, so just bear with me. If your jungler is pacing and wants to do something on a certain timing, because let's say you have control of the wave as you do here as Ruler, then you're going to notice that the pace of the lane that Ruler plays at will be in relation to the speed at which the opposing, or his jungler, not the opposing, but his jungler wants to also make a play. So what's going to happen is both of these two concepts, both the location or the intent of the red side jungler, along with the wave state, will be really like it'll be aligned. It'll have purpose to it. Okay, this is another fundamental concept. This is playing with the purpose. Of course, in this video, in this lesson, I don't have everything listed out, so this is not organized in that manner. But this is just surface level basic stuff that we should just be aware of moving forward. And again, in the future videos, I'm gonna have the notepad or the note here that I usually have, and the concepts will be more directive. But here, it's really important to just have the general awareness of what a lane looks like and why we do certain things. And again, going back to that earlier chart that I showed to you, that is currently the mind of most players. And again, we're just picking the most important concepts, lining them out for you in pieces, however, in this one, but hopefully in a more synchronized manner when we look at more videos, because I will do more in-depth videos, making sure that we're really aware of just the basics, really, like what are the laws of the game, what could happen. Now here, I'm gonna, in my future videos, I'm gonna be talking about, oh, he just played wave 4, wave 5 really quickly based on this timer. Now, when I say something like he's playing it quickly or playing it slowly, I mean the speed at which he changes the lane state based on the play of what his jungler or his teammate wants to do. Okay? Here's a very good example, very easy concept to understand. Looking at this wave here, looking at this interaction here. This is current state of the wave. This is actually like a concept I talk about in my first video, I believe it was. Current state of the wave. No, this is the first video, yes. There will be a future state of the wave. You have to be aware of the current state because eventually that links to the future state. The future state wave is here. This is the current state wave. The wave in lane right now, we can call this the current state. We can call the lane or the wave coming out of the nexus currently an inhibitor the future state, because that is the future state of what this lane looks like. So when you look at current state, then you look at future state, all of a sudden you realize that the current state means shove the lane. All of a sudden you realize that, okay, current state is this, future state is this, maybe we slow push. If the future state wave is not even out of the nexus yet, well, you can't slow push because you're not building 3 and 4, then you just crash 3. But if the future state wave is like closer and you can build it, then you can do so. Or you don't, you know, it depends on what you want to do. Current state of the wave is determined. This determines the future state. And then the jungle, or the play, let's call it, even, because it doesn't just have to be the jungle. I mean, generally it's a jungler in the lane phase, of course, right? But it could be anybody, really. The play is based on this. Okay? So here, in simple terms, we're just crashing. We can build 3 and crash it, or we can just crash 3 now and leave, or we can crash 3 and roam, or we can, you know, there's a lot of things you can do. Depends on what the play looks like. And so based on that play, we have a speed of play that we have to understand. This is another concept that I talk about in my first video, speed of play. And again, I'm talking about it again here, and this time I actually don't have my pen. So it's my mouse, so it's even worse writing actually. So I apologize. But speed of play is very crucial to understand. Speed of play is, okay, if we're crashing 3, let's play it fast. Kill it, play it fast, move. I don't know why you would do that, but, you know, in some weird world where there's a random fight in river, sure, okay, or about to happen, I don't know, right? Again, just conceptually. Okay, well, we have no reason to crash 3rd wave. Jungle wants to do, maybe he wants to do, like, starts topside, does red, and then wants to do raptors, and then wants to invade for whatever weird reason, or maybe does raptors and then wants to do red first. And we can align his movement with the invade to the speed at how we play the lane. The play will be a lot more successful. Okay? Now, what you see in lower levels of play is you see these two arbitrary concepts: the jungle play, or let's call it the play in general, and the future or the current state of the wave and the future state of the wave. Right? We see these two concepts in heavy disalignment, but the higher and higher level you go, you see it more, and that's when you realize that more and more teammates around you are going to be playing around current state of the wave and the future state of the wave. All of the plays will be in relation to this. If the play isn't in relation to this, you're doing something wrong. It means you're flipping it. That's absolutely fine too, because Silas exists right now, 2023. Okay? And you can flip it. You can break rules. Breaking rules is fine. This is a law. Right? This is all a law. But you can break the law. But before you break the law, you have to know the law. You can't break what you don't know. And so that's the problem. That's the fundamental issue. Low elo players don't know the law, but they not subconsciously, but they actively, unconsciously break it. Higher level players understand the law, and because we understand the law, we choose to break it. Now, whether you get punished for it or not is the rules of the game. But there is a law you should follow, and you should be playing everything based on that. Because the game itself in a conceptual level is easily quantifiable. That's why anyone can do this. You just have to think. You don't have to even be mechanically competent at this. Now, of course, being mechanically competent is going to be a very, very fundamental concept for success, right? Of course, you can cushion that by playing easier picks, but that's a very different topic. But anyways, moving back to this video here. Again, let's see what Ruler does. I'm not even going to comment on, I'm not even going to analyze this. I'm just going to show you what Ruler does. But we can see the fact that Ruler is slow pushing the third wave, will end up crashing the third wave. Crashes it at a very weird timing. Yeah, not the greatest. I would see more value in slowing it down and then crashing. Because again, a little bit awkward, I would say, because we do it. So again, we just to quickly speed this up, we crash this wave and then third wave ends up arriving. Let's go ahead and speed this up just a little bit. Just to quickly visually recap the entirety of the lane phase. Now again, any autos that go towards the wave, any autos that are going into Caitlyn's wave on the side of Ruler will only increase the push of the lane, and of course by nature, Heimerdinger was able to do that. And so we ended up crashing in a really awkward manner, which is not the greatest. But that's okay. Because really there is no play. This is a classic push waves, do nothing, and then move, which is fine, and then attempt to poke. And this is fine if there's a lack of jungle intervention, really, because as you can see, these players are capable of doing so. But of course, being aware of jungle intervention, you would have to play with a little more respect. But you can see the confidence that these people or these players, these ADCs, they're playing at. This is very important to feel. Again, not covering this in depth, really just covering the basics of this video. We do want to be aware of another very major concept. Again, just to reiterate, there's a lot of things we could have spoken about the whole thing, but again, another major concept here is we have a timer to base. Now, the base timers are based on cannon waves. So, very basic concept, right? Wave 3 is obviously a cannon wave. Wave 6 is a cannon wave. Wave 9 is a cannon wave. So, these we can call, and this is where the concept of current state versus future state wave states comes into, right? Where 6 is a base timer. Well, 6 could be a future state wave and 5 could be a current state wave. Just like how 8 could be a current state wave and 9 could be a future state wave. Because this is the base, this is the cannon wave. So when you think in terms of when to bail yourself out of lane, or when to really leave the lane if you don't intend on being in there, you can do it based on this concept here. But you have to be aware of it, right? So as you can see, the waves coming out of the nexus here. Cannon wave ends up arriving, and now as you can see, builds the cannon, and then crashes 5 and 6 into the Caitlyn here. Getting level 4 and immediately getting the wave under tower before the next wave ends up arriving, allowing Caitlyn to get a relatively good lane state, but not necessarily an issue. Mainly because he can still arrive and crash the wave, which he does. Exactly that. And again, in alignment with Lee Sin's routes, this is something very fundamental, very crucial to look at. Here, if you notice, where we see that Lee Sin is noticing that they're staying. Right, where Lee Sin sees that, okay, well, this wave has it is now locked, which means that now there is a decision, either they base and they allow this to happen, and of course the opposing ADC, or Deft in this case, also takes a base himself, unfortunately baited out by the cannon and the fact that the opposing teammates end up showing as well. He knows that they're in lock for a few seconds on this wave, which means that this is where potential to bail out the Caitlyn through a gank could be possible. Not saying that it will happen, because it depends on how the items and like what the opposing team is capable of and what the enemy jungle wants to do as well. So it might not just happen. It might be a 3v3 that we don't want to end up taking. However, again, very fundamental concept to understand is that this does exist in the game, where when a lock does end up happening here, a lock, as I said, the whole game is played based on waves, and a lock is part of that law, where when a lock happens, and now there's a play that could be potentially made. Now, whether the junglers pull the trigger, and this is another concept that I talk about, that I'm going to be talking about a lot in my videos, is pulling the trigger, which is it's literally the saying, like, don't pull the trigger too soon in this case, where if the crash out does happen and the red side team does win the 3v3 just based on champion dynamic, it could be really, really bad for blue side to attempt to try to actually make a gank, not knowing maybe perhaps that they lose the 3v3 there, especially in consideration with the angles and how many minions they actually have on their side. And so immediately pulling the trigger to take this fight on blue side could be a very major mistake. And so this could lead to a very easy double kill for even blue side or red side here if they mess up. So a lot of junglers here in this case may not gank. Again, I'm not entirely sure what's happening. I'm not really looking at the map immediately, but here, this is, again, if Lee Sin doesn't show up, he's not afraid of the 3v3. I don't actually know what the enemy jungle is or what they're doing. Again, he does decide to take it, and I'm not sure if he's telling him to bait or telling him to do something else there with that missing ping there, or that bait ping there, quote unquote bait ping. People really using it improperly, but of course, leave it to the lead. I mean, it's probably not. He's probably not telling him to off himself, but people are really using it as a toxic. I mean, honestly, I expected nothing less from the League of Legends community, but it speaks volumes. Anyways, no, he might just be telling him to off himself. I mean, that's a Chinese name. Honestly, some of these junglers are very, very toxic on the letter. But anyways, so, or maybe I'm just wrong. Like, I don't know. It's like, you never know. You never know. Also, it's very easy to misclick pings, by the way. I have pinged missing so many times, and I have accidentally pinged bait sometimes. And it's like, season 2023, man. Anyways, it's a roller coaster. Ruler takes the base, or sorry, not Ruler, but Def takes the base, and unfortunately, Heimerdinger is a good player and doesn't just let him base for free, as you can see, going back to the video, or back to the initial discussion here on the wave lock, where Lee Sin does take the attempt. Unfortunately, doesn't find it. Can't really find anything, considering Lux is not able to move in and find the Q, but not a problem. Maybe she landed, or maybe she threw it out. What happened? exactly again? She didn't. Oh, she got the Q off, but it was way too early, and they knew what was happening, and so unfortunate. But anyways, now we're just gonna crash the wave and take a base here, or attempt to take a base here. Unfortunately, not able to do that considering the stop. And again, as you can see, everything that's happening in the lane is based on how the waves are interacting. I haven't analyzed it very deep, but everything that's happening is based on how the minions interact. Where again, in contrast to lower movements that don't necessarily follow any rule or law, and they're more based on a feeling or emotional state sometimes. And that's absolutely fine, but you have to understand, again, going back to that graph we made earlier, be the player that is thinking about the concepts on a consistent basis. If you mess up, that's fine. But you have to be the player that is able to recover when something goes wrong and get back on track to the concept. Now, of course, there's going to be lots of concepts that we're going to be talking about. And then eventually, by the last lesson, you'll be able to put it all together. Because really, again, as I discussed, we break the game down in concepts. We understand these concepts, why they're important. We then experience these concepts. And then eventually we dissolve them. Because basically they just merge together, and then you don't have any questions about the game. You only have questions about specific things about the game, which then you'll see the difference between. It's a classic difference between high elo coaching and low elo coaching, as I mentioned previously. Okay, but that is it. So this has just been a very surface level video, nothing too complex. Just kind of talking about a few concepts, and again, we're going to be looking at a lot more different types of replays in a lot more in-depth perspective over time. So right now there will be 100 lessons in this series. 100. I will try to make 100 lessons, and by the 100th lesson, everything will just come together. And the way I'm going to do this is through not just telling people how to do it, but methodically showing you through active practice and explaining it through methods. Actually, just quite literally practicing through methods and slowly building competency as a player. Okay, so that's the end of this video. I will see you guys for the next one.